Work session for Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. We have a full agenda for tonight, but can we shuffle the order and allow our friends here from Epic and the Chapel Orchestra to go first this evening? Perfect, thanks. So Lucille Rossi and David Restivo are here to present to us about the Together in Music concert. Take it away, guys.
So everyone here know what Together in Music is, right? You guys know for sure. So just a quick brief thing about it. It's a concert idea developed by Barbara Yar, who couldn't be here tonight. So, but she is a musical therapist and a conductor, and she created this concert some years ago and done it with a few different groups that involve special needs children, both in the concert, playing in the concert with us, as well as in the audience. As we all know, we had this concert last year. It was a big success, not only for the orchestra, but also, most importantly, for these kids. The whole concept behind this was really shown in that concert, and we had the kids playing with us. We had a clarinet player, we had a pianist, and we had kids playing percussion in the concert, and it was really amazing, honestly. And when the ones that you guys that were there, when you saw the kid at the end conducting, and you saw this look in his face as I was playing, it was amazing. And at the end, after everyone was cleaning up, this little kid who was helping out all night wouldn't leave, and he was just like, "I want to help. I want to help. What else can I do?" You know, and that's the thing about this. We have all these testimonials in this thing about how kids who have never been able to go to concerts before in their life got to go, and there were moms literally crying in the bathrooms and in the parking lot afterwards, talking about how they never get to bring their kids to concerts, and like they get to bring it to this, and it was such an amazing experience for them. So that's why we want to keep doing it. It really is an amazing thing for these kids. You know, it's not even about the orchestra. It's not about anything other than that, really. So last year we did it, and we want to talk about some numbers here. What we did last year. I've printed this out for all you guys. Oh, before I do that, I want to talk about the Epic's involvement. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, for the recorded message or the video, you know, Epic is our committee here in town. Every person is connected, and our objective and mission is to raise awareness and provide opportunities for people with disabilities here in Newcastle. And so we've been trying to work on a number of different things. We've been partnering with the Chapel Orchestra on this event, for example, but we've started the Epic Ambassadors, which you guys are aware of, which is a group of our students or young people who have gone out into the community to be the ambassadors for the disability community as well. And we, you know, we're gonna try to do more, like we're gonna have a film screening in a week or two about what happens to individuals when they age out of the school system, and that's gonna be a very you know, important thing, and we'll look for your help in getting that publicized and promoted for not only, you know, Newcastle, but the larger community as well. So for last year for Music Together, as David said, you know, we not only did we help recruit children to be in the orchestra and to practice with Barbara to be participants in the concert part, we also helped recruit people to come as audience members. So folks that are not only like children and their families that are, you know, here, but also adults that live in group homes that really never get an opportunity to be out in community settings. We also had a number of our, now they're the Epic Ambassadors, but you know, that cohort group worked as ushers. And it was a great opportunity, and also in the concession stand as well. We made a concession table. So they had some opportunities to sort of engage with the community in a different way as well. So it's really been a wonderful partnership, and we've really been able to optimize and maximize as much as we can, you know, with this group.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about the age out jobs thing. This is one of the things that Epic, I think, is the main goal is jobs. And this was sort of a pilot for that last year at Chat Pack, and it worked great. And that's kind of what we want to keep doing, and more jobs at Chat Pack. I know that's what you guys see as the sort of ultimate
What
goal,
mission.
whenever that happens with the place. But it was easy, very little training. They all had people with them the whole time, and so it was a beautiful thing for sure. The whole day, the whole concert, everything about it was great. So last year we had, as you see in these numbers here, we had a lot of support financially with various things. We had the children's grant that Scott and John Finelli had gotten. I guess I don't know. They at least administered it for us, right? So that was $3,000 that Scott got to me through that. We had the Friends of Chat Pack that gave us $4,000 last year, and we had ticket sales that Scott and I split because he did the promotions and such. So that was our portion of that. And then we had some business donations, and then the town bought, if you guys remember, we bought some tickets that we gave away. Our portion of that was $300, and I think it was also included some concessions that, as a part of all that too. What's the store?
Trish.
Hip Kids bought and brought to the place to sell. So that was the total income from that, and you see our cost from that. And at the end of the day, the orchestra netted about $350 through the whole thing. So we literally broke even through the whole thing. And this year, I don't know anything about the grant. I didn't administer it, so I have no idea if that's even a possibility anymore. The Friends of Chat Pack say they don't really, I don't know what the situation is money-wise with them, so I really don't even feel like I could go to them to ask for money right now. And where business sales have been tough this year, honestly, trying to get donations and stuff and selling ads and stuff. It's been tough in town this year. So if we want to continue the concert and put it on, we need money, right? And at the end of the year, last year, Rob had said that the budget had grown for events, and I didn't know how much of that was, if it was for this particular concert or what it was for. I really had no idea what portion it was, but definitely wanted to see whatever we can get for it, because at the end of the day, there are real costs, as you see. So I think in here, in this, we broke it down to what those new costs are. In this section,
Page 66, you know,
yeah, right here. The personnel has gone up. We had, discussing it with Barbara, we added an extra service, which is a half service, to the concert, which orchestras are paid per service. So each musician is paid, every time they show up is called a service. And then they get paid a certain amount per service, right? And that's how we pay everybody. And so across the board, each service is, $4,500 for the whole orchestra per service, right? And so if you add all that up, 2.5 services ends up being 11,000. Barbara feels like there wasn't enough time before the concert last year, and dealing with special needs kids and stuff, it was really a scramble. And so we needed to add a half service to give us more time between that rehearsing that day and then having the concert. So that's really why the cost went up for the musicians. And then, of course, printing. The advertising, talking with Barbara and her partner Veronica, if we want to do real advertising with all these things, that's, we're budgeting that for that if we can get it. Miscellaneous piano tuning and whatever else comes up. So that's the real budget behind it. I really do not inflate the numbers on the musicians at all. I mean, that's really what it costs. So we presented some ideas of how the town could be a part of it, and we have a couple of choices here. It's either through, let me find out where that is.
David, while you're looking for that, didn't you say you wanted to do 2 concerts?
Well, that's another reason why, as a part of this presentation, is that we feel like we need to sell tickets. And that was a question throughout the year. I was kind of pushing for the idea of a free concert, because at the time I thought the town might fully fund this. And I know that if the town fully funds it, theoretically is supposed to be free. I mean, not charged.
Not theoretically, it's free.
Right. So, but if it's partially funded, it's impossible not to charge for the concert.
Well,
So,
let me just back you up, fully funded by who? If it's not fully funded by whom?
I'm sorry, I didn't
By
understand.
the town, is that what it's saying, if the town isn't fully funded, you would
We would have to
charge.
find money somewhere else to pay for it.
Right, but so therein lies the quandary, so
Right.
that's a problem, so if there's going to be public funds being used, we have an issue with there being, with it
Any
being-
funds at all, so we give $10,
No,
they would still have.
so if we are purchasing tickets, we can do that as we did last year, but if we're subsidizing the concert in that we're paying for half of it, if public funds are going for that, it's very hard for us to then charge, unless we're not charging residents.
Okay, and that was, yeah, that's what we had talked with, I think Ivy mentioned that, I think you talked to lawyers, whoever, that if we don't charge Newcastle residents, then we can charge tickets for everyone else out there on the planet, right? So,
And is that true? Ed told me that you can't differentiate between classes of people.
No, insofar as
I don't mean
like renting the
socio
chat,
classes,
no,
I
no,
mean
no,
like
so as far as like
residents versus
renting the chat
non-residents
pack,
and-
yes, but if we're using our taxpayer dollars to take and run a program, then we differentiate on our rec programs all the time, we charge different fees, whether you're a resident or
So
not.
this would be free for
So,
our residents,
right.
Okay.
which is not a problem, honestly, because I mean, we had people from all around the county and area coming to this concert last year, right? It wasn't just Newcastle residents at all.
What was it per ticket price?
Last year, we ended up bringing it down to 15 and then $10 for group sales per ticket. And I think, you know, we say right now, it's on my website at 25, but that was just a filler at the moment. We haven't sold anything, so in the presentation, it's 20 and 18. Those numbers are negotiable as far as what we're, you know, charged for.
Right, and the town is
Non-
also obviously donating the space and
Right.
no charging.
Well, I mean, I think the idea in general was that it would be a town event, and so the space would be as a part of the town's event. I mean, the original idea, so, now, with the idea that we could sell tickets if it's free to Newcastle residents, why do we need to sell tickets? Well, if it's not fully funded, that's definitely a reason why we need to sell tickets, because we've gotta get to that at least 11,500 number to pay for musicians and printing and such. If,
Well, if I could ask, I mean, other areas of donation, the Arts Council, anything like that?
as far as Arts Westchester, yeah, they have,
Or ARC, something like that, co-sponsoring it with
yeah, we've
them?
asked ARC, they're not interested in, I remember last year, they don't really donate to this kind of stuff. They could donate personnel, like people to come help, I think, but they didn't have any funds to donate. Arts Westchester has a grant specifically for this, but they didn't have it this year. And so I did ask them about it, because we got another grant for different stuff, and so that was definitely something that I sought and looked for. So, you know, if the town is giving us partial, then of course we would also go out and look for money other ways to fill that gap as well. Also, we feel like there's a possibility of a second concert that we would, if it oversells like it did last year, and either do it the same day or the next day, then how would that be funded? That would be another $4,000 to $5,000 that need to be paid for. Could we come to the town 2 weeks before the concert or a week before and say, hey, we need another $4,000? I don't know, maybe.
That's to pay the salaries for the
Yeah,
extra.
exactly. That's the extra service, essentially. And so, that would be tough, I think. So if we were charging, then we would be able to pay for that right away and then, you know, have the next concert. So those are the reasons for wanting to charge, as well as Barbara and Veronica feel to set a precedent of free is not necessarily a good thing. We feel it devalues the concert, A, and B, if for some reason funding drops for this concert, but we want to continue having it, to all of a sudden charge for this concert after it being free would be difficult to achieve in the future.
Well, I mean, if the point is that you're trying to, if this is a unique opportunity for inclusion in the community, and there are very limited opportunities, then you would think that people would seek them out and patronize them, even if there was, you know, free 1 year or, you know,
We
financial
hope so.
situations. But you're telling me that
Absolutely.
you oversold it last year, so
Oversold in that-
was it sold out last year? How was the response?
It was sold out in that it was filled, but did we sell as many tickets as the people that were there? Definitely not.
Okay,
That
but
didn't- that
there
was
wa-
not the
there,
even.
but that's my point, is that there is yeah, there's a demand for it,
Right.
and maybe, you know, you're pricing people out if you're talking about a family with a special needs child or children, and you know, even if it's $10, you know, if there are 5 of you going, it's $50 and
Right,
something to eat and everything, and it ends up being,
I
you know, a
understand.
cost. And so if it is opening a unique opportunity up for the community, I think there's value in just knowing that, you know, inviting the different segments of the population in and knowing that they're welcome. I mean, when we, you know, there's much has been said about the sound system at the Chapel Hill Performing Arts Center, but just as an aside, I specifically requested that there be mono sound there.
Sure.
Because the stereo is very difficult for, you know, certain kids, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was welcome there. And I think that, you know, recognizing that the theater is there, it's an amenity for the community, and making sure that the community is welcome, I think there's value in that. So-
I don't disagree with that. It was a challenge to get all those people there, for sure, last year, and we did at the last minute. It was very much a last minute thing, we scrambled and we got all those people there. Why the possibility of opening up a second one, possibly a second concert for the day or the next day. The options are 11,500 from the town, pays for it, pays for the initial cost of the orchestra and printing, as it says in the budget. And Newcastle residents free. The other,
Let me just jump in for a second. For example, with the baseball fields, we had a home rule legislation that allowed us to put signage up and we can then sell advertisement for the fields, the monies can go back into the rec program.
Right.
For those fields specifically.
Right.
Is there a mechanism to do that in this way? Is there a way to fit something like that here to allow us to generate dollars that go back? I don't know how to articulate that properly, like, so that, in other words, if the community is, the tax dollars funding it from the town, we don't have to make it free just because we're funding it for everyone. Is there some way to home rule that in some way to make this work? At least if not now, going forward.
Like, is there a way we can operate it more like a business?
In my view, you can. In my view, it's a town facility. You own it for all intents and purposes. And when you own a facility and you're acting in what's called your proprietary capacity, you can approach it almost like a business transaction and do the things, you have the flexibility to do the types of things that you need to do to make it economically viable. So if that means tickets, I mean, the bottom line is you have flexibility on this, and if you wanted to earmark monies, you know, and put that in a line for the facility for future use, you can do that too.
But I don't know if that exactly addresses the
that's
issue.
Well, that's new, I mean, that's like,
No, it's not, so.
okay, so explain it to me how
earmark-
it's.
Well, no, for the beautification, there's money earmarked, so.
Yeah, and
we
then,
could
you know, we
earmark-
earmarked $16,000 to run a children's program. This past
What I'm
year,
hearing
the-
is new is this notion that we can charge money for,
If it's a town program, if the board's decided that a certain program is gonna serve a public purpose, as I think you've decided here,
Yeah.
based on the audience and the whole purpose of what we're trying, then you can, again, since it's a town facility, and you're acting in your proprietary capacity, not a governmental capacity, you have flexibility in terms of shaping the program, the cost of the program to the public in a way, again, that makes it economically viable.
So we could, for example, have a $5,000 line item for this for the chat pack and these opportunities. Give them that $5,000, for example, and that would not
still
preclude
charge
us
for the tickets.
from allowing tickets to be charged?
Well, I'm assuming that
Because-
baked
because
into the
what I'm hearing-
baked into the 5,000 is this ticket charging, so instead of, 10 or 15 or some higher number, you're offsetting that by allowing tickets to be charged at the door.
But even to members of the community?
Yeah, or
Cause
if,
then that's the
Even
kind
if
of,
it's
you
a
go-
separate
that gets the way
entity
you wanna
that's
go.
charging the
Yeah,
tickets,
they
not
to
the
collect.
town.
We're giving them money and they can
It's the
profit off the
orchestra
money.
that's-
No, we're not, believe me, we're not profiting.
Well,
no, not the profit,
No,
but
but
can
we're
you,
figure out how to-
instead of giving you everything and then we can't charge.
Okay, I'm
Listen,
sorry,
I mean,
can we
yeah,
do
yeah.
one at a time, let's get Ed to
So
weigh in
a
on
third
this.
party can charge tickets if we're giving money to that third party to put on a concert
You're
that
giving
may
less
be
money.
for a public
right, but
purpose?
you're giving less money than you otherwise would, it's being offset by the ticket sales.
Yeah,
If we have a contract and it says that, I have no problem with that.
As long as it all goes paid for. Now, I would say that, listen, the orchestra doesn't need to make money off of this other than our cost. I'm not gonna lie to you, really, if our cost, all I care about is if our costs are taken care of at the end of the day. So essentially, I mean, this is one of the things we talked about, is possibility of like, basically the town is buying the concert, essentially, right? But one of the, I don't know if this was in the new presentation, but what would happen then is the advertising and all that kind of stuff then kind of goes on to the town. And we're kind of trying to take that away from the town having to deal with that, because the town doesn't have the capacity to do that right now, right? It really doesn't. So if we take that on, then we would have to get the money for that to be able to pay for advertising, that sort of stuff. Now, if the town's saying you're buying that as well, as a part of all that, fine, then we would facilitate that, right? As a part of the cost of everything in putting it on, essentially.
I'm sorry, I just need more clarity, I apologize. If we give 5,000, 2,000, or 11,000, at that point, it doesn't make a difference, because once we've given dollars from the town, there can't be an additional charge on,
I'm saying if, as part of a contract, well, let's just take some hypothetical numbers. If you were gonna buy a program, any program, for a public purpose in that facility, and the cost was gonna be 10,000. But you, through a negotiation, and you gotta make sure that this all works programmatically, in terms of the ticket sales, and you wanna maybe reserve some tickets for residents for free. I mean, there are a lot of different things that you could think about and bake into this, but if you have a public purpose, and you have a contract, and you have transparency, I'm telling you, flexibility in terms of how you structure that transaction.
alright, so since we can,
and so just to add on to that, so just to make sure it's all kosher, so let's say it's $15,000 and we're only giving,
Five.
throwing out 5. And we say, okay, you can charge tickets for the neck, whatever you think is appropriate. Let's say with ticket sales, they make they make $20,000. Are we okay with them keeping the extra 5,000? That's profit, or does the town have to?
It doesn't have to be, there can be profit. I mean,
Okay.
the bottom line is you want this, if you want programming at that facility,
Yeah.
you're gonna
There
have.
can be profit for them, that profit would have to come back to the town
No,
can't,
he's saying they can,
is that what you're saying?
They're charged.
as long as there's a public purpose for
They
the
don't, yeah,
concert.
somebody can come in and you could buy a program to be held at the facility for public purpose, and that vendor makes a profit, that's okay.
Okay.
at worst case
As
scenario, you
long
can
as
make it a
we're
line item
paying
back to them
less.
for the money that
There
is
has to be a
profited.
public purpose, I mean, that's the key here. There's gotta be some benefit to the.
Clearly there is.
And clearly there is here. So if the person coming in and providing that benefit happens to be a not-for-profit or a for-profit, and there's gonna be some money left over at the end of this that they're gonna keep, and they're gonna wanna come back and do it again, I mean, they have to be, it has to be economically viable for that vendor as well.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, I mean, there doesn't have to be.
That's, right?
I mean, I don't see us making 5,000 more, but,
I'm just,
you know,
I
it's-
was just
that we were doing.
I know.
It was purely hypothetical, just throwing out round numbers.
What happened to, I'm just confused about the
I
experience.
mean, we have no problem still doing that.
Yeah.
I don't,
Newcastle
why don't-
resident.
is that something that we can get?
Is that an executive
To me, that's
contract?
I don't know, I'm asking.
negotiation.
Can that be contract?
Is that executive
Talk
session
about that
conversation or is that?
executive session?
Well, I don't know how far along you are in the negotiations, but.
We haven't
Well,
nowhere.
but I think
We're
it's
discussing
important,
what we can do to help them to make it
But
happen.
Ed, this is actually leading to a more global discussion
Yes.
about the theater
Yes.
and how we can operate it then in general.
Okay, but in terms of free tickets for residents, having maybe a reserve, a set aside, a window opens and you can reserve for
And
free.
we love that idea, I mean,
Yeah.
it looks good for us, it looks good for that,
Yeah.
everything, and, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, usually anyway, right, for seniors or.
Well, we need a contract, we need transparency, there needs to be some, if there's gonna be some residual at the end, we wanna account for that.
Sure, oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, is that something the town builds the contract for, and then, or I present a contract, or how's that?
We can draft it.
Okay.
I think we should do a contract looking at it on a
Because it
slightly
should be
more
a-
global level.
Yes.
Yeah, I
And
think
something
that's
that we
something more
can
standard going
utilize
forward.
And
going
then probably another
forward.
conversation that
Yeah,
we
I
or
think,
or
right.
a group
Yes.
of it.
Yes.
Yes.
So do we have any guidance, Lucille, I don't know if you're the right person to give us that, about what the appropriate set aside would be for Newcastle residents? So if the town board were to make the determination that we don't wanna charge for Newcastle residents, but we're welcoming a charge for out-of-town residents, and we wanted to carve out that sort of block of tickets.
People with intellectual disabilities are like 2% of the population in general, right? So, but then you say like families and,
2%
I mean-
plus families, alright.
but again, like,
And that's everybody.
Everybody, yeah, that's right, in Newcastle, right, yeah.
Well, no, not everybody in Newcastle.
No, I mean,
but
meaning
everybody's gonna attend
in that,
the
in that
concert.
community.
Yes.
right, but then that's like adults too, like, that's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so for, mostly, it's geared toward mostly children, so, I don't know.
Okay, let's
Four
think
fifty
about that.
seats in there,
Yeah, 425.
425.
Yeah,
so,
I
I
call
don't know,
it 400,
100.
with the sound.
No, it was 425 with those seats today, it was like
With those
427 or something before yet,
435.
425.
I'm just gonna ballpark it like 100,
That's what we were
Right,
looking at
yeah,
anyway, 100
right.
of the seats, for sure.
And can that, with ticket sales for the remaining 325, get you where you need to be?
15 times 300, right, is whatever that is, right? $4,500, $4,500. It depends on how much you're getting on top of the ticket sales, right? I mean, free tickets.
Well, it's something you should also pursue some of those folks from last time too, as well. I know
Oh,
you're
yeah.
hesitant to do so, but.
Oh, you mean the other
Yeah,
There's other sponsorships and
I don't know, is that grant still available for the children's programming?
so.
No?
Yeah, so that was something that took place
Yeah.
a year ago,
Right.
and with these grants, you need to apply for them, a year in advance,
Right.
and even with our budget, this is the sort of budget proposal that we would be looking at in August when we start our budget process. So we did not budget to be able to carry this concert.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is the Friends of Chat Pack, that's up in the air of what's happening right now, I really don't know, honestly. I don't know if you know,
You
I
gotta
have no
talk to
idea.
Michelle.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no authority over that
I
money,
know,
so.
yeah, and I don't know if they have any money right now, to be honest with you, so, yeah, so, in my view, that money is non-existent as well, right, so, essentially, if you're talking selling 300 tickets at $15 each, some group sales in there as well, you're gonna, somewhere between 4,000 to 4,500, that, if the difference could be made up with that, fine.
So between
What was it?
15,000 and 4,500, is that what you're looking for?
That's, yeah, I mean, it's-
Weren't there people on the Epic, or at least who were, maybe, I don't know if they're on Epic, but they were involved in the concert last year, who work for certain schools and may be willing to either donate money or donate.
There was somebody who did like a
Resources.
GoFundMe,
yeah,
For
that was
some of those-
Veronica last year.
no, it was Christine
That was
Shea.
her too.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
they,
it was all part of the same group.
Oh, they were, okay.
Yeah.
They did a GoFundMe for the group home, the adults in the group homes.
Right.
So I don't even remember how much they generated.
It wasn't a tremendous amount, honestly, it was
I just
$600,
wonder if some of the
$700.
other facilities would be willing to donate.
Most of those places are also like not-for-profits.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
maybe
mean, that's
some of
why
the people could
art
come,
couldn't, yeah. They'd be seeking the free
Program
tickets.
to do it as a write-off. Like even this is the people who print, we get someone to print, do we normally print the program? Who printed it before?
Do you
No,
sell
okay.
ads in your,
We do, but that's for the season, not just for this particular
for
concert.
video
Yeah.
music
But we do, and I think that was one of the other concerns, if we also, could we, if funded from the town and we're selling tickets, could we also seek other sponsorship on top, to also help make up the difference, right? Does the town have any authority by giving money to say we can't do that as well?
Doesn't sound like it, Ed.
Sorry, I was just reading about the different convention center. What was the question?
So, on top of ticket sales, are we allowed to or discluded to also seek other sponsorship as well?
Well,
For this
Sounds like
particular
if we allow
concert?
I don't
ticket
have-
sales, there should be
I don't have a
allowed to seek
yeah,
a
sponsorship is, if you wanna go out, bless you, and, yeah, that's fine. But when will you know that and how can
I
we?
mean, within the next month, I mean, it is sort of late in the game right now, I mean, but, things have changed in the year and maybe people are feeling different, at least in this town, as far as giving money for things. I mean, it was difficult in the fall, I'm not gonna lie, in the town to get money from folks, but, now that construction's over and stuff, maybe people are feeling better about everything, we're gonna try, for sure. And as a part of the negotiation, I had no problem saying, look, we got the sponsorship, do we wanna, I don't know if it can be that fluid as far as, we don't need as much, or whatever, right?
Well, I think that, again, that transparency and doing this in a sort of a collaborative way
Right,
is the way we get there,
right,
and we can do it.
okay. And my story always is that the Philharmonic, I'm sure gets money from the New York City, and they still charge a lot of money for their tickets,
I
right?
was just reading up about Buffalo, the big convention center.
Yeah,
And you can imagine how something like that is run.
right,
Right, they're not expecting everyone who comes in there and exhibits to, not sell tickets or not make money or.
yeah. Well, that's another thing we wanna do is possibly sell a couple of tables there for people in this industry of special needs to sell some, like, they'll be there presenting their wares for the day in the lobby before the concert and after
Yeah,
and stuff.
that
so-
said, we're not the city of Buffalo, so.
Yeah, yeah,
We're gonna
yeah,
work
yeah.
a lot more
Yeah.
closely.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long is the concert?
An hour. Which is about all it can
No, no,
take.
I completely understand.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
Okay,
is that enough information?
yeah, I mean, I think, we need to have a conversation about what a potential contract would look like, keeping in mind that this may be sort of a backdoor contract or template or
Yeah.
whatnot for future, events that would be held at Chat Pack. But, I think I would ask you to go back and, to a certain extent, sharpen your pencils or take a second look at whether there are additional sponsorship or
Sure.
grant funding opportunities that are available. Because, and I know you're shaking your head, but I love the New York Philharmonic example, and I love Buffalo, but we're neither of those.
hear
We
you.
are a small
Yeah.
town with a small budget, and this, for us, in the town of Newcastle, is a big ask.
Mhm.
And, we did look to increase our special events line last year in the budget, and we had this concert in mind. We didn't have a budget when we did so. It doesn't come close to this, right? And so, when we dip into that line, we're then able to do fewer other
Sure.
special events. So, for example, we also increased the budget for the Chapel Orchestra for the
Those
summer
other concerts,
concert,
summer concert
right?
and then, yeah.
So like now we're talking trade-offs,
It's a balancing
we're
act,
also
sure.
talking about, we might not be able to do that if we,
Listen, we
look
really
to do so much
appreciate
here,
all
so
that, for
it's,
sure.
so,
Absolutely.
I think it just needs to be said that, the town wants, the town, we love this event, we wanna support this event, we're all in with trying to help with this event, and at the same time, we have budget realities
Sure.
that prevent us from being able to do as much as we would love to be able to do for you all.
Absolutely.
So if
So,
you
I
can
mean-
help us, and we will do the homework on our side as well.
At the end of the day, it'll be what it is, and we'll figure it out, but, but that's the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Where do you wanna start?
Go back to the top.
Oh,
Hey.
Yes, we have a roof assessment, stay for this, see
Don't
what
wanna
money's
say.
got.
so,
do any roofing, we can give you money.
Yeah, exactly. Trade in kind.
Yes, yeah, let's start with the community center roof. So we had some significant water damage at the community center when the roof basically failed in the fall. We went up there, we were able to do a quick fix on the flat roof, but it was just a quick fix. And one of the things that we did is we hired Weedski Associates to take and do an evaluation of the roof and sort of give us an idea of what we were looking at. And it was as bad as we expected it would be. And so what they're recommending is that we go out to bid for a new roof, understanding that there are at least 3 different roofs on that building right now. We have the original slate roof, which is probably in the best shape I've ever been in a roof. There's a flat roof that's in terrible shape along with some drains that need to be fixed. And then there's the newer slate roof, although it's only, 50 years old or something like that, is in just terrible condition. And it has to do with the type of slate that was used in acid rain and all this other stuff. So what they've recommended to us is that we go out to bid, that we end up with a base bid of slate with an adjustment for a synthetic slate roof, along with the concrete copings and an adjustment for metal copings to see if, we have some variety in our in the bids and we see where we can get the best price. They also conceded that the estimates that they gave us, although they were quite high,
Or scary.
scary high, because of the small areas involved, that they conceded that the rule of thumb that they used didn't really work in this case, and that the only way for us to get a true estimate of what this was gonna cost was to go out and bid it. So I think we're left with the situation that we go out and bid it and see what it looks like at the end of the day, and then we'll meet with the rec commission, and I'm sure Gray Williams is gonna have an opinion as to whether or not we go with slate or something synthetic, and how different they look and what the lifespan is for either one of them, and we'll figure out what we're gonna do with it, but we're looking at some significant dollars, upwards of 300,000, 400,000 for this one.
So I will say I have slate roof, and we had to redo our roof, and we replaced it with the synthetic slate. Looks amazing, you cannot tell, and it was significantly cheaper, and they don't make slate now the way they used to.
make slate.
So it will last significantly longer than a new
You say
slate
they don't
roof
make
would.
slate like they used to it and they cut it differently, is that what it's
I
the quality
think
of the
it's the
slate?
thickness and the quality, yeah,
It has to do, so I have a 200-year-old house in Vermont and it's got a slate roof and the roof is in fine condition and it's
Right.
the original, it's just, it.
Yeah, they
and
said the older part of this roof was in
It's-
better
right,
shape than the
the
newer
old-
part.
It's just
It has
not
to
the
do
same,
with whether they're
it's the
pouring it from-
thickness of the tile, how they do
Are
it
you
now.
able to put solar on a synthetic slate roof, because you can't put solar on a real slate roof?
Yes, you are.
So that may be something else that we consider. But we have trimmed the trees around the community center, so that's gonna be helpful.
We could
also-
take the electric
The
bus
other
to your
thing-
house and see your slate roof in
The
the
other
top
thing
floor.
I wanted to just throw out there is I was talking to somebody today, from a solar company, and they will pay us to rent the roof of like the community center, for instance. There are not that many trees around there.
The back of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities
And they would pay us to rent that, and basically, this company actually does solar where it's integrated into a building, so it would be like an actual roof, it's not panels. It's integrated into a building, and they would pay us to rent it and put in the,
Do they actually
Slate.
do the roof?
yes,
Love that,
so I will get it to you.
thank you.
And Sustainable Westchester.
Right.
It was the annual meeting I attended today, has a community solar program that does the same, so there are.
Okay, I think maybe we have some opportunities. Okay, that's great.
So, if we could, it wouldn't look like slate.
But you know what, you wanna see the
I
front
really
of it?
like the idea of having a solar roof on there.
I'm a little bit concerned about this asbestos because I know the cost of asbestos is really high. We went through this at the nursery school and just getting an abatement done for a 10 by 10 foot wall costs $7,500. And so do we know what the we don't know what the actual percentages were for this.
Yeah, but we will find, yeah.
Okay, cause then if we get the estimate to get the roof, then we have to get the estimate for the asbestos too, it's probably gonna be astronomical.
Right, you wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. You know, it's older house.
Okay.
Alright,
So the next step is to prepare the RFP and to put this out to bid.
Right.
When do we think that will?
well, I'd like to talk to the companies regarding the solar and just see how they, because the issue is that I don't know that they're gonna do the flat roofs. They may do the slanted roofs, not necessarily the flat, so I don't know if we have to draft the RFP with an eye towards having them only bid a portion of it. I just have to talk to the companies and find out how they would, maybe they need to come over and take a look at it.
Are you talking about an RFP for the synthetic or an RFP for?
No, it would be for.
You'd bid all three. You'd
Everything.
put out the
Everything.
RFP and you'd say, give us your bid for option A, option B, and option C.
So I just don't know if we have to break it, if a solar company would do the entire roof, they only do some portions of it. Sometimes they don't do flat
I see.
roofs, sometimes they only do slanted roofs. We have both, so I just need to be able to figure out how to take and structure the bid. But yeah,
Okay, again, I'm emailing about the contact information.
thank you. Best value memo. So, the board had spoken very briefly, in the past about, enabling the town to, have the option to award competitively bid contracts on the basis of best value and not just the lowest responsible bidder. And so, the vehicle to do this is actually the adoption of a local law. So Nick has provided us with a memo, there are 2 alternative local laws that have been, given us examples. And the question is whether or not this is something the board would like to pursue.
So I very much would like to pursue
Me
this,
too.
because this doesn't mean that we have to award a contract based on best value, it just, preserves the optionality for us to be able to do so in the event that we think we are putting out an RFP for something, competitively bidding something that, we believe warrants a best value, determination, so, I see no reason not to move forward with this unless you can offer anything based on your.
There's no downside, as you said, you can always go with the lowest bidder. But I guess the thing that we should be aware of going into this is that when you do decide that you want something to go out with the best value component, a little more care has to be put into shaping the actual request. You've gotta actually have criteria.
Yep.
You don't wanna be in a position afterwards and saying, well, we just like this one
Yep.
better.
Right.
Okay, so that's the only, a little extra upfront work, but in the end, hopefully a better result.
So Ed, let me ask, because the reason this kind of came to the forefront, we've talked about it in the past, why it came up again, is that we've been able to take advantage of using some of these purchasing cooperatives, and their criteria is not lowest bidder, their criteria is best value. So they are then, through their bidding process, defining what the best value is and the rubric for analyzing the quote. So that wouldn't be anything we have to define. If these purchasing cooperatives are going out there or bidding it, and then are awarding the bid.
As long as we're comfortable with the criteria that they use for the best value analysis, again, that it's gonna require a little, I'm not gonna say it's a heavy lift, but it's gonna require a closer look.
Right.
And typically all that comes through Nick.
Right,
Comes through.
and when you're doing that, or, when you're piggybacking, it's
Right.
more or less a check the box.
Yeah.
This is gonna require, what did they think about, and does that work for us? How did they award this, what were the criteria, is that what we need here?
Right, but this will give us, again, the optionality to be able to piggyback off of some of these existing contracts that we cannot utilize today because we don't have a local law that allows us to consider best value.
Right.
To me, this is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, me too.
And then so we would pass the local law first, and then we would also need to change our procurement policy, because I think our procurement policy mirrored the local.
Correct, we do it
Okay.
do it at the same time.
So I'm gonna ask Nick to then take and present us with a draft of a local law. Do you have a preference as to the 2 that we're giving?
party council on that.
Yeah.
That's
Alright,
what
cool.
there was Bedford's and there was one other one.
Right.
I don't think the other one indicated where it came from.
I didn't see that, but we'll
Yeah.
give you the latest and greatest.
Okay, great. Next is the ELQ change orders. Rob, do you wanna go through your?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. First is that Bob Cioli, town engineer Bob Cioli submitted change order number 37A through F for the town board's approval, so we will need that tonight to approve that change order. As I have done throughout the last 2 years of the project, I have updated the spreadsheet that I've been including with all the change orders and
Sorry, I don't think they realized that we needed it approved tonight. It's
Oh.
in the payment thing, they'll just prepare the resolution. Okay, sorry.
so
And just to
the,
be clear, the change orders that we have in the packet tonight are for work that was authorized by the
Correct.
previous town board. We had just not received the change order.
that's correct, and you'll see other ones, there will be others coming down the pike that through our construction meetings and through communication with Bob Cioli and John Caswick and Leo Dragone, they were authorized to do this work. They're a little slow on the paperwork and getting all of that stuff submitted, so this is all work.
It's not new.
So the process currently is that ELQ is finalizing all their paperwork, they're submitting it to John Caswick at Boswell for his review, and then he forwards it to Bob Cioli for his review, which then gets passed along to the town board to approve. So
I just wanted to make clear that,
Yeah.
you know, while Lisa and Jeremy and I are
Yeah,
to be held accountable for these
Yes.
authorizations, that they happened under the previous town board.
sure,
so
and
Jason
there are a couple of layers that are looking at those, so John Caswick is reviewing all of them to ensure that they were authorized and they include what they were supposed to include, and then they get to Bob and he does the same thing on his end.
Great. How are they doing on their punch list?
Oh, so the punch list is basically frozen at this point, much like outside. And so when it comes up in March, we will go through it again. We actually, Bob Cioli and I were gonna like walk over the winter and check out, you know, like 5 things a day. And John Caswick turned to us and said, it's 3 degrees outside, wait till it thaws, see how everything shakes out, see what else is, you know, has happened over the course of the winter. The only thing that we're actually waiting on, rather impatiently, is the railings. And as soon as they come in, they've been, you know, custom fabricated. As soon as they're available, we've told the LQ to, you know, come on down and get them installed. Those are safety things, and we
And
do
that's
that.
for in front of Whispering Pines and Starbucks
And Starbucks and Waka,
and Waka.
and also the staircase going down,
Next to a pizza.
yes, next to
Yeah.
a pizza. So
And what's
all of
going
those.
on in front of Great Stuff?
So in front of Great Stuff, they are actually, they will be constructing, one step really will be constructing a handicapped accessible ramp. They wanted to do it themselves, they wanted it, you know, with cobblestones and bluestone and things like that, so they're gonna do it. So that's a temporary ramp that they have out there right now, to be able to accommodate their residents, and as soon as the weather breaks, they'll be constructing.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions on the change orders?
So let me just touch on the spreadsheet too, that I've updated it and included a few more things as I mentioned before, I've been adding to this and refining it to try to make it as clear as possible. So the first page that I've come up with just kind of summarizes everything that's in detail, that's kind of hard to look at if you were to page through everything. But it's just showing where we are.
That's page
I-
50?
What's that?
Page 50?
Page 50, yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you look 2 columns in where it says original budget, including the contingency, 14.78 million is what we funded this capital project for when we borrowed. We anticipated, including the contingency, 12.78 for the contractor, $1 million for construction management, and $1 million for design. The next column over where I show revised budget, what I've done there is I just add, every time we have a change order, that amount gets added to the original budget. and that is basically what we're obligated to pay at this point. The actual spent, the first column, is what we've spent to date, but as we mentioned, we're a little bit behind on billings, so the actual is not going to reflect the revised budget. So in that revised budget, I just wanted to give a forecast of what we're expecting to pay when this is all said and done. And at this point, this is it's gonna be pretty close to what the final ends up being. On page 52, and you can't really see it, I had it colored on my spreadsheet, but the black and white doesn't really cover it, but if you go down to ELQ change order 37 A through F, that's what we're approving tonight. And then going past that, our ELQ change orders, that first section that says ELQ change orders submitted to Boswell for approval, that's what John Caswick's reviewing right now, and it's removable bollards, concrete structures overrun, all the way down through the underruns. That's what's sitting with Boswell right now, and Bob's waiting for that.
Are those change orders gonna make its way into that, the longer spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's there, they're already in, it's incorporated in that total, yes.
I see. Yeah, just the number, just the numbering doesn't necessarily match the spreadsheet though, right? So like 58, 59, 60, 61.
Oh, you mean change order numbers?
Yes, exactly.
They'll go in order. Yeah, we don't have the numbers yet because Boswell hasn't released it and we haven't created the exact change order number for it, yep.
Thank you.
And then towards the bottom of that section, the ELQ remaining change orders estimated. These are what we're hearing from Leo from ELQ that is most likely outstanding. He's estimating about $300,000 more in change orders. And they're also estimating about another 100,000 in underruns, things that were pulled out of the project, or, for example, in the contaminated soil, we approved not to exceed up to, I think it was 870,000. We're not going to spend that entire amount, it appears. So, so there will be some that comes off of that. So in the end, that nets to about 200,000 more. And again, that's all incorporated. So that number at the top is what I'm anticipating at this point. It's gonna be plus or minus, nothing's exact. Leo hasn't given us exact numbers. I don't know if you saw, there was an email just tonight with 3 more that he's sending to Boswell, so. If you flip over to page 54, I've just kind of summarized the change orders by type, I guess, so that everybody can see exactly why there were changes to the original contract. And if you look at this, I've been saying that there's really kind of 3 categories. There's kind of the stuff happens category, which would be contaminated soil. There's not much you can do about that. It's not our fault that, yeah, well, when you're dealing with that much money, I have to laugh or I would cry. But then there's other stuff that we had them put back in. There's additional paving. The original contract didn't call for full depth restoration on Lower King, we did. It didn't call for us to go around the corner on Allen Place, we did. Didn't call on us to go much past Woodburn. Down Greeley here we did, and also up on North Greeley. So there's some paving that we put back in there. We added some additional sidewalks and curbing up North Greeley. Some of the, I think the drainage work was a result of the redesign up on King Street, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And then you see some of the stuff that was due to the delays. Boswell Field Office, the Boswell Extension, and the acceleration cost for ELQ. So those are some of the things that were a result of the project being delayed. So, bless you.
Thank you.
And I'll just note, where it says Boswell Extension, it's not just the extension, there were some Boswell change orders too. I left that off of the description, but, so that was just to break that down so that you could see really where the majority of the change orders were coming from. It wasn't exactly all one place, it wasn't all a result of a delay, it wasn't all a result of unexpected, and it wasn't all just stuff that we put back in, so kind of a combination of the 3. The next page, just because I like to do charts and graphs, I did that. And the final page would be just, if you went to the I added a section that hadn't been included before, miscellaneous vendors. You see, they total about $16,000. These are just the little dribs and drabs that come in when our electricians were out there working. They had to get little electrical supplies. It's Chappaqua Paint and Hardware, it's Berger, it's, Millwood Lumber, I think, is on there. So these are all the little bits that just get added throughout the project.
Well, I'll take the opportunity to say that, I think we've learned a lot from doing this project in terms of, how we would structure contracts with our construction vendor and our, project management vendor going forward. Certainly there were a lot of change orders and, that's always unfortunate on a project, but I think to come in 15% over budget on a major capital undertaking of this nature is not terribly surprising. And it's also, kind of par for the course, and I think one of the things that we learned to do really well is this. So I really wanted to take the opportunity to just thank you and commend you for the work that you did on putting the spreadsheet together and tracking the budget across the course of the project, because this has been tremendously helpful to me and I think to everybody else to be able to just get a really, solid accounting of the budget, and that's really been the piece that all along, at least for me, I felt the most confidence in, so thank you.
Yeah. I feel like I perfected it, and now we're done.
You wanna
But
start
that's
something
okay,
else?
no. We'll finish, that'll be fine.
Alright. Ready to go on to goals and objectives?
Yep, great. Okay, so when we met in our work session 2 weeks ago, we discussed this sort of template that we put together for how we might track progress against town board goals and objectives over the course of the next 2 years. And we sort of described projects, identified the stakeholders who are involved in those projects, and put together a spreadsheet that will allow us to track the status moving forward. I had started with kind of a baseline that I put together, and then it had gone to the rest of the board for comment and feedback. And so maybe why don't Jason and Lauren, why don't you guys start by just sort of describing what you did and how, because what I've got in front of me now is your kind of efforts on this, so you wanna start there?
Sure. So I started going through each line, figuring out, whether it was to some extent measurable, right? Was this something that we were going to be able to measure and say how we were going to meet those goals, and then just went one at a time through to go and figure out what made sense. And so a lot of our changes are sitting in the comments. There's a couple of lines that were added as well. That was basically our process.
And there were a couple things that you added, do you wanna describe the things that you added?
Sure, so for example, with creating thriving hamlets, I just added a note here because this has been on the beautification board's radar with improving the look of the spaces, the green spaces, particularly on like Lower King Street, even looking at the plaza area where the Petticoat Lane Mall is, looking at the alley between the nail salons on Lower King Street as well. And Jill at the beautification board had met last week and talking about, what plantings can we do here just to make it look presentable, as well as plantings behind the Chappaqua Hardware, like in that parking lot. It's just minor details that I think that we can look at, and also replacing the remainder of the benches of the streetscape and just doing all the finishing touches so that we're ready for the spring and summer.
And do we see that as something that applies to both the Chappaqua and Millwood hamlets, or is this really sort of a continuation of the work of the streetscape committee and specific to the Chappaqua hamlet?
Well, I only addressed the hamlet because that's what I've been closely working on, but we can certainly look at Millwood.
So, regarding Millwood, we just got the contract for the sale of the property along Santa Mara Road. It was just signed today, so we're moving along. It's going to council tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward. So we're at the 90% mark with New York State DOT, but we couldn't go any farther until we actually had the contract in hand, so now we've got that in hand, and maybe it's worthwhile at this point for us to just take and have NV5 come back, or at least review the plans with them to just see the changes that DOT made. I know, for instance, there were certain tree plantings along the road that we were sort of excited about, and DOT moved them back. Citing that there were sightlines issues, so like on the strip along Rockies, there aren't gonna be trees on the street, they're gonna have to be back beyond the sidewalk line, and beyond the snow shelf. So,
Sorry, there are trees there today that we need to transplant, or there were trees in our original design?
No, there were trees in our original design, we thought it would be nice to, introduce some
Yeah.
shade trees,
I see.
There's no
make it a
Christmas
little
trees
bit,
there.
thank you so much, make it a little bit more, inviting for someone to walk along our brand new sidewalks there, and it'll still be inviting, it's just the trees will be on the parking lot side of the sidewalk as opposed to on the street side of the sidewalk.
So maybe, if I'm hearing what you're suggesting, it's sort of like the piece of work that Lauren's added here, as a goal and objective is something that we can kind of start with the Chappaqua Hamlet, perfect our kind of process there, and
Right, and
look
then take a look, but we may wanna take a look and see what it is that DOT has allowed us to do, and then sort of build from there. But I do know that we're talking about 8 additional benches for downtown. The Chappaqua Hamlet, I did meet with the BAB, and again, the whole idea that just, having a different perspective on things, one of the things that Steve Coleman had talked about was eliminating all of the cedars on Lower King, and to plant a new green wall that would sort of shield the conifer development from people sitting in that new sitting area that we put right at the base of Lower King. But the cedars are quite tall, they're bare from the ground to maybe 6 feet up, but they do create a wonderful tall shield.
Right.
And so the idea was, instead of taking them down, let's try to preserve them, let's try to put
Yeah.
something behind the cedars
Yeah.
that will give us
I love
a
that.
little bit of a shield. But again, that suggestion came from the conservation board that was sort of heartbroken over the fact that we were gonna be taking down mature trees. And was there any way to preserve them? So it
Right.
was such a nice sort of, perspective to get, and at the end, we're gonna have a much better project because of it. And so we are still reaching out to Steve Coleman to help us with the landscape design, but with the idea that those cedars are gonna be preserved, let's try to put something behind them to sort of shield you when you're sitting there at that, the nice bluestone eating area that has the new tables and chairs. And continue that line straight through, so that we have this just lovely green wall and you don't see the railroad tracks. So, we're very excited about that, and also, we have money in the tree bank to be replacing trees at the train station. We actually lost quite a few trees, and so we'd like to, take and sort of do as much planting as we can down there and sort of restore that area as well.
And then along the same lines with beautification, I've been talking with Peg Sackler
Yeah.
and with the Arts and Culture Committee about doing art,
Right.
like public art and murals on some of the walls, and
That would be fabulous.
so we're talking about that now, so
Oh,
I will be back to you.
Okay, terrific, cool. That's great.
So when you asked about, the kind of input, one, two, three, four, fifth column was some of the comments, things like, when discussing a local preference law, and we are now reviewing lowest bidder versus best value, how that's gonna come, is there gonna be some, conflict between creating a local preference law and how we go about, making sure that,
Yeah, so I would say that's probably a specific question that when we have that drafted,
Yep.
we move forward with that, we can, have that kind of robust conversation at the, while we're determining whether or not we wanna move forward with it once we kinda have it.
got it. So most of the comments are related to that.
Or specific,
Yes.
yeah, I get it, that's cool. And then you also added, I was gonna ask you about the airport noise that you added here, which is a good addition. I was thinking though that we ought to move it up to be in this sort of climate smart bucket. Because I think when we talk about the impacts of airport noise, we're really looking not just at the noise, but at sort of other environmental impacts, and we're also considering noise as a sort of type of environmental impact, so I would actually just suggest kind of moving that up to there. But I think that's a good addition. I'll leave it at that.
We also didn't have, and I apologize for sending this in advance, but I figured we'd just talk about it. I did wanna put, chat pack on here, because I think it's really in a transition, and unfortunately, when eventually construction starts again on the residential portion, that's gonna inhibit it again, so I think we probably can't take big leaps forward. But I think at this point, cause I think it's just gonna get stopped again a little bit, it's been inhibited by all that construction, but I do think it's time now to kind of reevaluate some things with Chapac.
Oh, cool.
To make it more thriving and to make it, well, I don't know that I wanna talk about it right now, but,
So consider what goals you'd like to see
yes.
for Chat Pack.
So
I think that's-
there are some capital improvements to the exterior. You know, we've talked about the steps and the front entranceway and eliminating the trip hazards there.
And we have money for that was taken out with the bond, right? That's part of the RFP that we're working on.
So that isn't nearly enough money to do that, so we took out 150,000, we spent 40?
About 40,
Yeah,
maybe
that,
about 50, cause it,
yeah, the steps and the entranceway are somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000.
Okay.
so the
I-
anticipation with the bonding money, so we spent that on, was it the sound system or the lights, I can't remember which one it was.
The lights.
Lights?
Right, cause it,
Yeah.
NCCMC did
Yeah.
the sound.
Right.
So we spent 40,000+ on the lights. The remainder is anticipated, we know the HVAC system going, the boiler, the cooling units.
Yeah, John had issues.
Those have to be
Yeah.
replaced, so that was kind of what was anticipated for the remainder of those funds.
Okay,
So no other funds for Chapac were borrowed in the last borrowing.
okay.
So anything else, we would have to create a budget and try to determine how to fund anything at this point, whatever capital type
But I
improvements.
feel like what Lisa's suggesting though is that before we go about setting a budget, if I'm hearing you, you're saying that you wanna kinda take a step back and look at kind of the mission, vision, and goals for Chapac and
Yeah, but
Use
that's
that to
separate
drive.
from the capital improvements, I mean, the capital improvements have to be done.
Right.
It's really important, but just in terms of the general global how it's functioning, I do wanna focus on that a bit as a goal. I don't wanna say too much more, but,
Yep.
but the capital improvements definitely need to be done because there are safety hazards there,
So it's
you know.
steps, it's the front entranceway, it's the handicap
It's a
park.
handicap parking,
That's a huge deal.
definitely, I mean, and some of that, we're kind of waiting until the land gets subdivided, which I believe the subdivision, at least around Chapac, has all been agreed upon, that's kind of done, but it's part of the global, you know, residential townhome area, so none of that's gonna get done until everything's been decided, even though the actual boundaries have been decided upon, but we can't do the parking until that's done. But so some of it is kind of a wait,
Right.
you know, we know what we wanna do and wait, but all of those capital improvements really need to be done.
Yeah,
We need to get
there's-
rid of that
there's safety
fountain.
issues, yeah. It's, yeah.
Great. Okay. Did you guys have anything else from your sort of review that you wanted to add or note or discuss? What about from the comments that you submitted earlier today?
Mine were very specific, and I don't always follow instruction the best. So so I dug a little deep more in the details, but I just followed up on things that you said, and some of them I extrapolated a little bit. For example, the solar and the idea of having a walkway southbound out of the train station,
That's such an
covered.
interesting idea, I
It's
have to tell you.
covered.
That's
That
such an
also,
interesting-
it can you put solar on top of it, it serves two purposes, it would provide solar power and give shelter to people walking southbound into the parking lot, which would be used, I'm sure, by everyone.
Everyone.
That's one way to keep people like actually channeled.
And that part of the park lot has not been fixed yet, so that would actually work very well
Yeah.
to consider this
Wow.
as we push it out and do it. I think that'd be a fabulous opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You know what's amazing to go along with that, I don't know if you've ever been to Manhattanville, I mean, granted, it depends what we wanna eventually do with our parking lot, but the entire thing is covered parking where it's just awnings over all the parking spots and they are all solar.
Right.
It's amazing and
And
it's
how
actually
long
very
is that-
attractive.
Yeah, how long is that lease for?
In Manhattanville?
No, it's just
like 20 years. I mean, they're long term, so
Yeah.
that's amazing.
We have that guardrail out that's gotta go, I mean, the whole area needs to be
no,
fixed.
no,
It's
no,
a
no,
walkway.
I
Yeah,
have to
the
tell you, the
walk- that's-
walkways is
yeah.
fabulous.
Make that a covered
Yeah.
walkway with solar, it'd be a win-win.
Yeah,
I
fabulous.
threw in here just something that's sort of a big ugly, one of the many big uglies is, I think at some point, whether we do it or not, we have to look at the concept or idea of a parking structure and what those costs would be in a public-private sort of relationship and see if that is something that
Yep.
is doable and at what cost, where it could be, how that frees up property, you know, and then if you look at the form-based code, you know, despite the boogeyman that's being put out there that this is some monstrosity that we're gonna just go to public referendum and the entire town's gonna wanna sell off our land, which is not gonna happen. Nonetheless, it's something that needs to be considered, even if buildings go from one story to two-story to three-story.
Right.
There's that possibility. Another issue is the fire department issue, which we've just been dealing with our own fire department in terms of the bond, but more directly, more recently, with Mount Kisco and the cost that's being borne upon our community. You know, we need to be more, I don't wanna use the term aggressive, but more aggressive working together, I guess that's appropriate, with our fire departments and first responders to figure out things that we've looked at in the past, for example, what can we actually do as a community and use taxpayer dollars to incentivize more volunteerism to best ensure that we don't go to a private fire department and another ambulance corps or anything like that. And just how do we work together? I mean, we should have a committee, maybe even with a council person, commissioners,
I
you know.
nominate Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
We actually,
Second.
we had a fabulous
All in
meeting
favor.
before,
So I
yeah,
think we
before
need to.
this with Millwood Fire Department.
Actually,
It was very
I
helpful.
mentioned this to Jill, but I met one of the women who's on the board of commissioners for the Bedford Fire Department, which just had their bond pass last week. And she had been giving me some thoughts about kind of best practices and how they went about kind of galvanizing support for that. And I know that Eric Nicolason from the Chappaqua Fire Department has also, you know, had some meetings up there. But I think that there are opportunities for ways that the town can kind of help support that. I think it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, a resident reached out with a possible idea of, when we're looking at the comprehensive plan for the sidewalks, to look at 117 southbound by Old Farm Lake.
Yep.
And either access that to
Yep.
South
Smith-
Greeley
Smith
or
Street.
alternatively Smith Street.
Yeah.
It's a much shorter much shorter in terms of length, and is that possible, and you can walk people down that way?
Yeah.
It may not work, it's just
No,
something
no,
to
no,
look
no,
into.
no, it's a really interesting.
So
idea.
the challenge for us is that 300 feet there is not Newcastle property. It's town of Mount Pleasant.
Is it really 300
So,
feet? Which,
yeah,
where
so-
specifically does it go to Mount Pleasant?
Like
The couple of
sliver
houses
before,
right
yeah.
before,
Yeah.
Really?
right
south
before Smith Street.
of, north of Smith Street.
So we think there's
Ah.
potentially a mechanism for us to be able
That's
to
interesting.
still move forward with that in partnership with the town of Mount Pleasant. And I think that we will include this in our analysis and our, you know, comprehensive, that's what's gonna make it comprehensive, if we look at all of
Can we
these
just put a
things.
flag there and they can challenge us, we can invade them, is this ours?
I think they'll be thrilled that, they're putting
And then last but not least, and I, you know, Lauren mentioned this before, but I think maybe we should look into examining more ways to be engaging the public. I think we do a good job of trying to be as open as we can, but we have the Triangle, we have electronic screen, we have the Examiner, the Daily Voice, we have and create a budget line to just, on big projects, to make sure we have a few dollars that we know we can spend solely for public outreach.
Put the work session on a new electronic sign out there.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
we're
Yeah,
moving along.
so yeah, I mean, there's distinguished steps we can take.
See, it resulted in many people coming to me.
Yes.
But it'll catch on.
One, he was here anyway.
That's okay, next week, more people.
But anyway, I think, well, right,
Yeah.
it grows, but I think we should
was
look at
last
ways to be more proactive and do it, even though I think we're doing a good job as is. Those are my not following your instructions responses.
Well, there you go.
Anything else for you?
Nope.
Okay.
Alright, I'm gonna call Sabrina. Rob, can you just?
Timing, so
So what I wanna be able to do with this is we'll take this and clean it up. And then I'd like to get it up on our website and to start to track our progress against this. You know, I'm all serious about that PMO stuff. Hold us accountable.
the first three items, those were falling on our desk, and those are in
Yep.
draft, ready to go.
Yeah, I know. I have to have some additional conversations with people here.
Okay.
And then we have to start having conversations about it. Yep. Great. And then, so we'll have quarterly meetings to review our progress against all of these things, understanding that most of these are things that are gonna, you know, revitalizing the chat pack and creating a new, plan and capital plan and goals and objectives. That's a multi-quarter, potentially multi-year initiative. So is comprehensive sidewalk plan. These are things, but
Yeah.
The way that we'll get it done is to just kind of track our progress over time and set,
So,
measurable quarterly goals.
right, so the only thing is as a complement to
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
there are some things that we are actively working on and are
100%,
moving
yes.
ahead, so I just don't wanna lose track of those because I don't want, I'm thrilled about this, but the public should just be aware of the fact that, our basketball court and inclusive playground is moving ahead behind us. But
there are things that come up in the course of everyday work, and so that's a great point. And actually, maybe if you and Rob want to take that back and just think about, if we're reporting on this on a quarterly basis, is there also a paragraph that goes in there about, here's some things that we were working on outside of the goals and objectives, but that we want the board to be aware of and we want the public to be aware of.
I would say use your judgment. If it's bigger than a bread box, then it should be, it should be on here. None of that, but what's gonna wind up coming out of this, for instance, like from the comprehensive sidewalk plan, will actually be a new line item at some point in time, which is actually building out the road,
right,
building
right.
out the sidewalk or repaving,
Right, you probably will be getting in the next, couple of weeks, the results of an RFP from, bid from, Bob Cioli, SVNB5 to, for feasibility studies on the extension of the project that we
Exactly.
talked about, so that's gonna be coming up.
Yeah, and that was the challenge that Lauren and I had, was figuring out what's the right level of detail at this point in time. Before
All of this.
before it all gets broken down.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Take one pass.
Yes, please.
One of each.
One of each of the two.
Okay.
We're doing really, it's not what's on the page,
We're doing really well.
it's just a visual for you to glom on to.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through the whole thing.
In 3 minutes or less.
How many handouts are there here?
There's two,
Oh, just two.
there are just two.
You got some-
One is a flow chart.
You got some extra stuff in here.
Yes, I did, cause I figured there might be people out here who want copies too.
No, you've
I
got
just
some of your
taken
own,
one.
you've got some of your own.
But just
Papers
taking one,
in there.
just one,
Really?
Yeah.
one of,
Okay.
It's a single page from there.
Oh, I do, yes, you have the rest of my file in there. Don't take my file.
Oh, now she says it.
Or take it, take it.
If you want it, you
All
can
the
have it. There are no secrets, I am transparent.
Oh, there is.
Thank you. It's all the stuff you've received, so
Yeah.
this is my record keeping. Yes, you did get it a million times over. All right. Well, hello.
Hello.
Do we want me to? Here comes Lisa.
Yeah. Yeah, well. Chose you on purpose, I wanted something to do it.
did you get in trouble? Did you have to-
Yep,
No, I'm not.
the principal took her out.
Just more work.
Sorry, you gotta press the button.
Exactly.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about, the overall topic is the scoping for the draft environmental impact statement for the form-based code. So I have a quick presentation here, I'm gonna talk you through what scoping is and get some of your feedback if you're ready to provide feedback and bring you up to a comfort level with the scope that will be subject of your public scoping sessions next week. So we've been through this before. This is, what is the form-based code? It addresses the relationship between building facades in the public realm. It looks at form and mass of buildings in relation to one another, and the scale and types of streets and blocks. This is vastly different from the type of zoning we have right now. We have what's called use-based zoning, where you can have a use here, you can't have another use here. This is a little bit different in that we really focus on the placement of the building on the street and the relationship of one building to the other buildings around it. So that's the most defining difference in the two types. So just to give you a sense, our form-based code, as we've been discussing it today, it contains dimensional and architectural standards. The code allows right now up to 4 stories throughout the study area. It allows 5 stories in limited areas, and I'm going to point out here, the red are the only areas where 5 stories are allowed. And you obtain this detail by looking at the regulating plan, which is contained within the code. So just to kind of clarify, there's a larger map over to the left of Ivy, or my left of Ivy, which highlights the same thing. The red areas are the only areas where we're talking about 5 stories. And I want to emphasize a little bit why the consultant team working with the downtown working group identified these areas as 5-story areas. I think it's important to note that when we talk about a form-based code, we are really looking at creating a community center, okay? And we do that by differentiating buildings, creating density where there is not necessarily a pinpoint right now, and using height. So in this plan, as if you remember the early discussions with the consultant team, they did a lot of historical research regarding the train station. The form-based code allows for an expansion of the existing circle in front of the train station. So it really hones in and creates a public space walking out of that train station, so that when you arrive in Chappaqua, you are arriving into a park. Around that park, they've identified that area on the edge of the parking lots to be 5 stories because that is really the center of the community. They're trying to bring back the historical center of Chappaqua, which was the train station. They've extended the 5 stories still within the parking lots out to Washington Avenue. The 5 stories are right now would be facing each other along the access road, Old Pines Bridge Road, within the parking lot. The town hall property is right over here. They've also concentrated 5 stories facing the train tracks and facing the Conifer development, all along Allen Place, underneath a bridge, and then along the Quaker Street Bridge. And as anyone who knows, who's lived in town or driven in town, there's a huge drop in elevation coming down that bridge. The 5 stories would blend in with the bridge on both sides of the Quaker Street Bridge. So those areas are also identified for 5 stories. 5 stories also carries through to Allen Street along the town-owned parking lot. A majority of the 5-story areas are currently are occupied by town property. The train station parking lots, the Allen Street parking lot. The only areas that are under private ownership, which are allocated for 5-story buildings right now, are the businesses between Woodburn and Quaker Street, right here, where the Citibank building is. And then on the other side, from the Starbucks corner, down around and towards where the private property melds into public property near the bridge. Okay, so there's select properties right now which are allowed to go to 5 stories in accordance with the existing version of the code. The remaining areas are identified as 4 stories, or 2 to 4 stories, or 2 to 3 stories, mainly 2 to 4 stories.
And just to be clear, those areas that are allowed to go to 5 stories have a range on them as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is not all 5-story, it is 2 to 5 story. And I can tell you, we've had conversations with property owners who are renovating buildings downtown right now. There are folks out there who have no interest in renovating their building. They will stay as single-story or two-story buildings if they exist that way today. This code means nothing to some of them, okay? The changes may not be realized for generations in some of these properties. So again, this is zoning. It is intended to be legislation that will exist for a long time.
For clarity, so right now, the parking lot, that's zoned light industrial?
Yes.
Right. And how many light industrial developers have we invited in that you're aware of over the past decades?
None.
Okay.
I can tell you, my office has received many inquiries over the past 7 years from folks who are looking to develop town-owned land and come to you to do senior affordable housing, to do mixed affordable housing. Right now, we do not allow it, we can't even consider it, they'd have to come to you to create a special process and create legislation to allow that to happen.
Okay, and then, assuming that the town board was on board to do such a thing, whether it was light industrial in the current form or later on with the zone-based, form-based code, pardon me, we don't have the authority to do so. This would be the town's decision via referendum to sell off that property and then take those next steps,
That's
correct?
correct.
So if someone said, that we need confirmation that the town is going to put this up to a referendum, it has to go to referendum,
Sale or lease.
100%.
Yep.
We don't have the ability. Correct?
Sale or lease is
Alright.
a permissive referendum.
So, in other words then, but unless the town as a whole, in a referendum says, we want to have all this built out on those parking lots and sell it off, it ain't happening.
Correct.
Just like it's not being developed for light industrial.
Right.
Thank you, okay.
Okay, so I've spent enough time here, let's go to,
I have just one more
Okay.
question I
Okay,
wanna
back
ask
up.
about this, and this is, it's not a hypothetical question. Well, I guess it's a hypothetical question in one sense, which is that if you were to build a 5-story building at the base of the bridge, so where there is private property today, so.
Right here?
Yeah, so
And
for
here.
example, right, yes. If you were to build a 5-story building there today, would that be the tallest building in
No.
our hamlet?
no. I would, we'd have to do some more detailed site planning, but I would gander that the building that was approved, I think it's right here, the Conifer building, would be a little bit taller than any building over here. And you also have to remember, the form-based code has certain architectural styling that would occur on any 5th floor to reduce the mass of the 5th floor, okay? So, there'll be
Setbacks.
dormers, setbacks, all sorts of architectural techniques on the top floor of the building to reduce their overall impact from a visual perspective.
There is an existing 4-story building
Yes,
on
there
Lower
is.
King as well, right?
Yes, it is right
It's the last one by the pine
Here.
trees, by the
Yeah, right.
cedars.
right there.
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, that we thought that allowing for up to 4-story buildings going down King Street would make it look like a corridor. And we didn't want to allow
So we
such tall
changed
buildings
this.
going the
This is
whole
allowed
way
at 4
down.
stories, but again, Lisa, getting back to that point, the setback of the upper floor,
I'm not talking about there,
Well,
I'm talking
this-
about coming down the hill into Chapel.
down here,
Yes.
it's 2 and 3, where it's pink.
Oh, okay.
This
That's
is
right,
2
I
and
thought
3.
you said all.
It begin, no, this varies in here. The purple, for the most part, except for the red areas I've identified, are 2 to 4.
Fine,
The pink are 2 to 3.
fine, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I have to remind you folks that when we took on this process, throughout the comprehensive plan process, we recognized the residences surrounding this area, and there are provisions in the code to allow that continued protection. One of the areas, let me go to the next slide, because I think the next slide really looks at the changes from the version that you reviewed last week to the new version that we're expecting, okay? I'm gonna jump off that thought for a minute, I'm gonna revisit it, but the addition of neighborhood notification, that was a comment that was raised at the work session last week, which was a very good comment. We now have a section within the code that includes a neighbor notification to give surrounding property owners an opportunity to come in and comment on the proposals. And we're not talking about the idea of the proposal, but the actual structures and understand how those structures will impact their individual properties. We refined the height of the first floor for commercial uses. The code already had the residential first floor at 11 feet 6 inches. The commercial was reduced from 22 down to 16. The other big change, and this is the nitty-gritty that will really shape the build-out, is the distance from the curb. These details, the height, the distance, the percentage of the frontage, those are the details that are gonna go into the build-out model that will really affect the shape and the height of the buildings. So one of the things we did is we reduced the distances from the curb, and that is how close the building can be to the sidewalk and to the curb. We had several areas that identified a 25-foot from curb to building setback. In some of those areas, it made properties very hard to develop. We reduced them to 16 feet. These streets, North Greeley Avenue, King Street, South Greeley, and Woodburn, were reduced to 16 feet. On Lower King Street, where we have buildings right now today as close as 8 feet, we said new buildings should be 9 feet setback individually. If somebody wants to develop the entire block at once, then we'd like them to go 16 feet. Okay, but we have a new condition. It's 9 or 16, and there's a condition. If it's the whole block, it's 16. If it's an individual building owner, it's 9. We removed the vertical projection signs. Those are the signs that run in a north-south direction. There's only blade signs are allowed, which those run horizontally. We adjusted the AFFH requirements to be consistent with the town code. Anything less than 10 units would mean one of AFFH unit. Anything between 10 and greater would be a 10% requirement. And we added Victorian styling. So these are, mind you, there were other editorial changes. These were the big ones between version 2 and version 3. And I'm anticipating to have version 3 available to you hopefully tomorrow.
May I ask for the refined height, Sabrina, the 11.6 and the 16, is that just for the first floor, or is that for all the?
This is first floor.
First floor, right,
First
okay, I
floor.
just wanted to double check that.
Didn't we also say that we wanted to limit the maximum height of buildings?
The consultant is to come back with that height. The issue of limiting by height is a definition issue. We struggle with the definition issue today. If you say a building can't be more than 35 feet, what are you measuring that 35 feet to? The distance of the floor.
He's a smart guy, he'll figure it out.
We've
There's
struggled
gotta be
for
a mechanism
years.
to
We've
it.
struggled for years. It's very confusing. Going with a floor-to-floor measurement is much easier. Okay, we can give you the overall heights of buildings at 3 stories, 4 stories, 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories, and 5 stories, based on the floor.
Okay, just make sure he looks at that, because I think the way version 2 was written, a 3-story building could be very tall, or a 4-story. We wanted to limit the maximum height of
We'll
those
go back and look
buildings.
at that.
Yeah.
Alright, we'll go back and look at that.
And that was because they were able to create loft space duplex.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was
And that
the concern.
So normally a 3 stories, it's gonna be like a 5-story.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, the intention here is to do it face value. You know, it's not a 3-story that measures like a 5-story, it's a 3-story.
Right, but unless it's written,
Understood.
argue around it. Yep.
So here we are, secret process. You have this handout, I'm sorry it's small. I'm just gonna walk you through kind of what we've done, what you've done as a board, and where we end up today, just so you have a good thumb mark. I printed this out so you could take it with you.
Yes, you must.
On the bottom, this website. If you go to this website, this is DEC's Seeker homepage. There's a lot of good information on there, easy to understand PDFs you can download and read if you're so inclined. So what we had done first was we said, is this action subject to Seeker? On its face, legislation is not subject to secret. It's a type 2 action. Because of the extent of this legislation and what we want to accomplish with the legislation, we called it a type 1 action, okay? Which requires the preparation of a generic environmental impact statement. You guys reviewed a full environmental assessment form, and then you made a determination of environmental significance, and that was the positive declaration that you issued last week, and that's right here on the flow chart, right here. Our next step, which is circled, is scoping. That is what we will be doing now. Before you, I handed out to you a draft scoping document. This scoping document will turn into the table of contents for the generic environmental impact statement. What is scoping? There are 6 objectives to scoping. It's really to focus the environmental impact statement on the potentially significant adverse environmental impacts. You will also look at a scope to eliminate any non-significant or non-relevant issues. You look to identify the extent and the quality of information that is needed in order to understand the impacts. You identify a range of reasonable alternatives to be discussed. You provide an initial identification of mitigation measures, and you provide, most importantly, the public with an opportunity to participate in the identification of impacts, okay, which is why you have a public scoping session next week. This is the proposed action. So this is a section within the scoping document which I felt I needed to bring to your attention because this is the basis for all of the work that is going to be done to understand the environmental impact. The proposed action includes the regulating plan and the regulations. It includes the development standards within the new legislation, the architectural standards within the legislation, the definitions contained in that legislation, and then the development review and approval process. So all of that is considered the proposed action. In addition to the legislation and everything that is within the draft code, you will also have a build-out scenario, which this says that you look at the inputs, the description of the assumptions that go into the build-out scenario, but ultimately you are going to run the maximum potential development with the entire study area based on the zoning to determine how many residential units you will have. You'll look at how much commercial retail development you will have.
You could have.
Under the maximum build out.
Right.
Secret requires us to look at the maximum environmental impact, okay? We will never see the maximum environmental or the maximum build out.
And I think it's important for people to understand that the maximum build out does not represent a master plan for the development of the Chappaqua Hamlet.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Also, with the maximum build out under the form-based code, we will look at traffic, we will look at parking, and we will look at pedestrian circulation. Okay, so it's all encompassing. Worst case scenario, what are we looking at? We will identify open spaces, natural areas, historic features, landmarks in relation to the build-out scenario, and we will look at utilities in the hamlet. We're going to look at our existing sanitary system, our existing water system, and stormwater management within the hamlet. Okay, so to gain a better understanding of with the build-out development, what do our utilities look like? Okay, just playing maximum extent.
What's the process? Should this, the EIS find things that would need to be mitigated? What's the mitigation process to kind of?
It will identify what needs to be mitigated. When we are done with the scoping, we have the EIS, you'll have a final EIS, and then there'll be a finding statement. So several things can happen. You can, as a town board, commit to capital improvements, to make certain improvements to allow certain things. You could restrict the code to not get to the point where you need to do certain things. You will have a menu of things that you can do to mitigate the impacts. I will use an example in a moment to kind of give you that scenario. There are 15 scope categories, and these are very general, these are just the headings, everything within the scope falls within these categories right now. So they range from land use, zoning, visual resources, community character, natural resources, infrastructure and utilities, transportation, pedestrian circulation, parking, cultural resources, community facilities and services, socioeconomics, hazardous materials, air quality and noise, growth inducement, effects on the use and conservation of energy resources, irreversible and irretrievable commitment of resources, and alternatives. Right now, there are 3 alternatives within the scope: no build out under existing zoning, and full build out. I gave to you today what I started to do, a track change version of the scope. There are other things that I would like to see in here. For example, I would like to see an alternative, particularly when it comes to visual impact, traffic circulation, and parking. If we were to limit the height within all areas, even on town property, to 4 stories. We need that comparison to understand what that looks like at 4 stories as opposed to 5 stories. So that is a track change that I added in here. You know, thinking about, you know, other things that the town has experienced, you know, when we were doing projects, we are within urban fill. We know that depending on the content of that urban fill, it may need to be disposed of in different ways. There should be discussion of that within the EIS.
Right.
It will be up to you, the town board, to determine how far we assess that urban fill. If we do so now or we wait, but again, it's about environmental impact. So, we can talk about things tonight, if there's things that you wanna say, Sabrina, is this in here? Or we can give it some time, you guys are discussing this next week, the public is coming in to discuss it. This draft will become a track change with many more comments that will then be given to you to approve a final scope. And that's where we are.
And when are you gonna put this on the website for the public?
This is already on the website.
It's revised?
I revised this today.
Okay.
So before the public comes into our public scoping session next week on Tuesday, do you have any guidance that you can provide around what kinds of comments would be helpful and just anything that the public might wanna keep in mind as they come in
I
to
think
meet with us to
if the
discuss
public
this draft
is
scope?
interested in commenting, I think it's important for them to look at the categories and talk about specifics, for example, views. Okay, if, you know, there's a list within the scope right now of areas where the view sheds shall occur. They may say, I want a view from my backyard, and offer up their backyard to take pictures or transposed views looking into the hamlet, looking into the development from their backyards. Things of that nature. The devil is in the details, making sure that our consultant team is considering the right information as they prepare the EIS. So drilling down, and I can say to you, most everything that everyone's gonna say falls within one of these 15 categories, okay? But what the community can support us with is the detail of what's important to them. I'll figure out, the consultant team will figure out how it fits into the scope, but what's important to them. It's not, we don't want 4 and 5 stories, we wanna stay at how we are. That's not what this is about. This is about really looking at the impacts of changing the legislation to align with the comprehensive plan and what people have told us.
That may not be what it's about, but
I
that is what
understand.
you're going to hear.
That is the intention. That is the intention.
So you're looking at things like, if someone were to say, I need to make a turn off of Prospect to get onto King, making sure that analysis is done to make sure
That intersection, yes, absolutely. And for example, the Greeley House, right? We wanna make sure that that historic house is maintained and protected. There may be certain things with traffic and circulation of vehicles, even pedestrian circulation, that we might wanna make sure that that building is protected and that the frontage of that building along King Street is enhanced.
So will we be looking at traffic circulation within the hamlet? I mean, is this
Yes.
something that we look at, even
Yes.
going through the train station,
Yes,
things like that?
yes.
including timing of that, right? School letting out you know,
Right,
early morning.
absolutely, so these are all very important comments.
I feel like we've been looking at traffic since my
I
tenure.
know,
was
God,
The
there.
right?
consultant has the
Yeah.
ability of those
It's like,
previous
wow.
traffic studies. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel, they have all that information.
Right, so that was the question, so we've, you know, when I take a look and you've got like synchro here, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, we did that when we
Right.
did the warrants for the traffic light, are they able to use all that information?
They will, they may need to update it in certain instances, these are all really good questions for me to confirm with them.
Okay, alright. Because I know we've talked about traffic circulation and we've talked about traffic and it was always, well, not quite yet, now? Yes, okay,
Yeah.
alright. Alright, because you know, it would be great if we could deal with some of the issues, the congestion at the train station, just a better way to, you know, use some of that traffic flow. Is there a specific email address? So we're gonna have our public scoping session next week. I'll put it on the electric board as soon as we figure out what time it is, so we can, you know, alert as many people as possible, that they're welcome. But if people wanna give comments, is there a specific email address, or they're just writing it to town board?
I believe that there is a link on the
Yep.
webpage, it goes to
It's
plan.
plan@mynewcastle.org.
plan@mynewcastle.org that circulates the comments to myself as well as the town board and, you know, people who need to see the comments.
Okay.
But I think it's,
sent to the
yeah,
town board,
I
so
think
same.
I think it is best to send comments to one address so we can keep records of them. They do go into the record for the environmental impact statement, and when somebody emails comments, we will go through those comments and make sure that the scope is addressing their concerns and really identifying what they're saying and how we can incorporate what they're saying into the work we're doing. Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, I know I asked this question, I'm going to wind up asking this question often throughout my tenure, but this is, CEQA process and the EIS is something that we budgeted for 2020? Like, where does the funding
This
for
comes
making
out of
this
the
happen?
existing contract that we have with Kimley Horn. The
consultant.
monies for the work that we're doing with Kimley Horn on the form-based code come out of the $1.5 million settlement payment from Summit Greenfield.
Got it. Thank you.
Which is not 1.5.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
It started out that way.
But we lovingly refer to it that way.
It could be $4.
Down to the last
This one,
We're good.
the draft, oh, sure, so we had a request from a individual homeowner, takes it to the Sawmill Sewer District, so with the board's permission, we'll have a resolution next week. Alright, Lucy, you're on. Oh,
Oh,
sure.
we're doing this now, yes. So we have a late edition that's passing around right now. It is a proposed local law that we asked council to draft that I am formally introducing to allow the town board to appoint a hearing officer in a police disciplinary matter, to hold a hearing and to make findings of fact and recommendations to the town board. Ed, can you explain a little more?
Yeah, so the town is subject to the Westchester County Police Act with respect, and with respect to police disciplinary matters, the act requires that the town board sit as a police commission and actually hear and determine any disciplinary charges that are brought against a police officer. What a lot of municipalities have done, but not the town yet, is adopt a local law that allows the town board to appoint a hearing officer who will conduct a hearing, take evidence, make findings of fact on the disciplinary charges, and then issue a report back to the town board with a recommendation. And then it becomes the town board's decision at that point to accept the recommendation, not accept the whatever, and at that point you'll get not only the findings, but the evidentiary record. So it takes the burden off the town board of actually having to conduct the hearing itself. Puts that in the hands of a hearing officer, and you get a report and recommendation. But in order to give you that, the option of doing that, we need to adopt a local law.
So we're gonna be asking the board to set a public hearing.
Yeah, so if, I'd suggest that the board, set this down for a public hearing on February 8th. I'm sorry, 4th, February 4th. Yep, so if there's a motion,
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye, thank you.
And we'll put this on the website.
Are we ready to go?
There are just take a look at the administrative items. So payment of claims is, we've got that, there are minutes. I will ask the board, these are draft minutes.
I didn't look at the minutes.
Did anybody look at the
I didn't look at the
minutes?
minutes.
Okay, no,
get a
that's okay, we
chance.
can approve them next time, but can I please ask you to review them? Ivy did, there are edits, you know, a couple of names misspelled, things like that, so that we could just clean them up before we actually,
You're gonna
put them
wanna,
next-
you're gonna wanna make sure that
Yeah.
the things that you said get captured the way you want.
Yes.
You said.
You'll notice when you put something down that it isn't quite, not even,
I
what
would
you
call
said.
Jason that.
Or I'm sure I
It's not public.
I'm sure I was far more eloquent than that when I said it.
Always.
So if you could just get those edits to me by the end of the week, then we can make sure that they get into the packet rapidly. Going forward, okay. New York Police, I'm sorry, surplus vehicles, it'll be for next time, police and water. New York
my
Leak
baby.
Detection, it's an annual renewal, we go around, detect leaks in the middle of the night. Hazard mitigation grant, it's a 5-year renewal, the county does this as a shared service for us, it's a tremendous convenience, we so appreciate them for doing it, and we'd love to do it again. Authorization to purchase, it's a recreation tractor with accessories and a dump truck, these were approved and included in the last, in the budget. An annual extension of Hubbard's Cupboards, which is our Meals on Wheels provider. And authorization to attend a conference for both the administration. We'd like authorization to issue a bid for a pump from Sulzer, this is for the Innwood Pump Station. Water maintenance materials, additional scope of work items, and last but not least, 2 police vehicles.
Can I just make a comment about the conferences that the
Yes.
rec department attends? I mean, this might sound a little bit corny, cause Jason, Ivy and I just attended the Albany conference and I learned a fair bit, especially about like best value bidding and all that good stuff, but like when these folks come back from the conference, like, is there like a post-mortem of like, oh, here are the best practices that happen at these conferences and this is something that we can replicate it in our town, et cetera, like what are the findings and like how is that, is there a way that that's communicated to the town board or is it, I apologize if I'm like stepping
No,
on
that makes
toes,
sense.
but
No, that makes sense.
you know, I'm just curious to know.
I will ask the rec for a report to the board after their
I
conference.
think to Lauren's point in general, I mean, just in general, it's something.
Well,
if
so,
it's- if
I
it's-
mean, I don't know that we wanna hear necessarily about.
At your peril, when DPW goes to Cornell local roads, you know, the temperature of, you know, hot mix asphalt and, you know, best practices, they will, absolutely, no.
Well, maybe not, you know, I
Not
guess maybe like with Jerry, there's, you know, Jerry ensure that whatever someone learned that's being put, I'm using him as an example.
Yeah, no, of course,
Chief
yeah, no.
You know, being put to good use, or I'm sure it's not a boondoggle, go to Utica, New York, for example, but you know, but.
No, but I think if there are takeaways that they wanna implement in the town,
Yeah.
we should be notified. Sometimes the
Yeah.
conferences are really just getting education on things, we don't necessarily need to hear about everything, but if there's something that should be implemented within the town, it would be
Yes,
great
that's
to
exactly
hear.
what I'm saying, yes.
So I expect from the three of you to share with
We brought
Lisa
back
that-
best value, that's what I did.
Oh, I'm just getting started. I had a whole list of things I'm gonna do.
We have 4 resolutions.
Alright, I move to approve payment of claims amount of $728,117.93. Listed as summary pre-check writing report and detailed reports all dated January 21st, 2020. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the hiring of the following individuals, position of recreation attendant within the recreation department at an hourly rate of $14 per hour to serve as chaperones for the ski trip program, subject to completion of the background check. Maximus Palmieri, Robert Palmieri, and Matthew Rule.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I move to authorize the purchase of items number 1 through 4 in the table below for first stage impeller repair for the second vertical turbine in the amount of $28,715 from Sulzer Pump Services US Inc. 621 Heron Drive, Bridgeport, New Jersey, for the following items in the list below.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll change your letters,
Thank you. Go for it.
I move to authorize ELQ Industries change order overruns number 37A through 37F in the total amount of $346,846.55 in accordance with the details listed below.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Want to adjourn?
I think we got to that.
Want to
Second.
adjourn?
I move to adjourn, yeah.
Second.
Well, thank
All in
you.
favor?
Aye.
2 a.m.